Yep. All right. Welcome to Rapid Fire Manufacturing. Today I'm with Chris Massey. He's got a pretty awesome background with large companies in aerospace, Boeing, many different GEs. So he's actually in the trenches each and every day right now doing the hard stuff. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Dave. Like I said, I'm honored to be here. Grateful we finally got an opportunity to sit down. Currently, a lead manufacturing specialist is what they call it at ST Engineering, which is previously a subsidiary of GE, which was called Middle River Aircraft Systems. Still kind of goes under that acronym, where we focus on making thrust reversers and nacelles and other components for fixed wing structures mostly, and I don't think so much military anymore. I think it kind of phased out. I think if you look at my resume, it looks like a lot of different positions, but it's really just GE and Boeing, contracting roles and things like that. So I like to get that out of the way because if you look at it, I don't want to look like I was jumping around too much. But started off as a contractor, kind of way to get your foot in the door out of school and things like that, and then kind of a test run to see if you're worthy of it. And spent some time as a contractor, different contracting houses within GE as a CNC programmer, NC programmer is what they called it, and tool designer. Background in schooling was SolidWorks. And when I first got to the job, they locked me in a room with a bunch of gentlemen who used CATIA that I had never used before. And they said, don't leave this room. This is a true story. Don't leave this room until you know how to program 5-axis machines in CATIA. So, if you use one programming software, CAD software, I think it's fair to say you could pick up on others. And about 7 days later, I think I posted the first program to a 5-axis machine out of CATIA. So that was interesting. And some great guys, old school programmers, the guys that used to put the tapes in the machines and things like that. And they taught me a lot about that. So back to CATIA, the fundamentals, and interesting. A lot of carbon fiber, a lot of composite, things like that. Always grateful to cut metal when the opportunity comes up, because then you really get to let things rip. So you cut enough composite, you get happy to go cut some stainless or titanium sometimes. So, or aluminum. You want me to cut aluminum? I'll do it. You don't have to pull my arm.
Oh, that's awesome. So basically, we got two paths we can go down. Which one do you want to choose?
What's the difference between the two?
Well, you got to pick. That's the thing.
Let your left hand.
Left hand. All right.
Yeah.
So there's actually nothing in both of these. So we're going to go into your background.
Excuse me. I thought you were throwing me a zinger there.
How did you get into this industry? And I know we talked a little bit about it before. Yeah. So kind of walk everyone through that journey and kind of the craziness behind it.
Yeah, I think I'll start kind of at the beginning, right, where I didn't know anything in high school, and dive a little bit deeper in that, so there's some type of background story to that. So, and not to get all mushy, but right. So I grew up single mom. Dad wasn't around, and things always break, right? So you get when you do get the toys or things like that when you're a kid, you break them, right? And then you're wondering, well, we can't afford to get a new one, so how do we salvage this, right? So I kind of got into that frugal mindset young, right? So I think I told you the story about the bikes. A Walmart had opened near the house in, I think, 2001, and their process was if there was a defect on a brand new bike, they threw it in the dumpster. So us being kids, we were like, well, that's free game for me, right? So we would take all these bikes. We talked to security too. They said we could do it. We would take these bikes home and we would try and fix these problems that they may have seen with the bike. So we just ended up with a whole bunch of bicycles and tried to salvage parts and build our own, right? So, but then we got into the mindset of like, how are these parts even made, right? Like a crank assembly, I specifically remember thinking like the assembly of like the neck where the stem would go in, like the bearings stack up. And it wasn't that detailed as a kid, right? But now that I'm thinking of it, but I remember thinking just like, how are these things made, right? How are things made out of metal? Who comes up with this? Like, does someone just draw this on a piece of paper and then someone decides to make a bicycle, right? Or things like that. So every time, that's just one example, right? But like every time things happened, the chopper bicycles came out. So we were like, how can we make a chopper bicycle? So we tried to use like like that was like a thing for a while, like in early 2000s. We were like, can we make chopper forks for our bicycles out of like a set of crutches? And then we realized they weren't strong enough, so they would just break, right? So we were like, what do you do, right? We don't know anything about the strength of metal as a kid. So I think that kind of sparked an interest in how things were made. So then going into high school, kind of same process, right? You're always trying to build and learn and things like that, but didn't really have any resources, right? Had father figures, not so much, I would say, that were mechanically inclined, right? So I go through high school, I played lacrosse and football, went through some trials and tribulations in high school that kind of took me away from what lacrosse was my strong suit at the time. And then I focused on work study, right? So then I got into the mindset, junior, senior year of high school to be like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. So that, let's just go make money. So I would take work study after high school, and I worked for this guy, Greg, amazing mentor at this point, but great friend. And he started an electric company. He opened a produce store. And at 17, my friend and his nephew ran a produce store. So we got into the side of business young where we handled the books and things like that. And we were like, wow, there's a lot of money to be made in produce, which we know nothing about. And then I went to the community college locally back home, and I was like, I hate it, right? I just can't apply my skill set or what I did know at the time to just arbitrary classes. Before I got out of high school, my guidance counselor asked me if I heard of Williamson, and then someone I know's dad had brought it up. And Williamson's a college that I went to. We talked about it a little bit. I'd like to talk about it a little bit more too, but I'll dive into that. Yeah, it was a trade school. It was called the Williamson Free School of Mechanical Trades, right? So you see the word free in school, and you're like, well, what's the catch, right? So I did a lot of research on that, and it was ultimately a 3-year trade school, 120, I think it's 120. At the time I went, it was 120 credits with a specialized technology degree. So I looked into it, and the requirements were basically your family had to have, a specific income. You took the ASVAB test to get in, and you did a letter, got a letter of recommendation, and then you did an in-person interview. So ended up getting in, right? It was like I told you, it was like the greatest day of my life. Like I physically got sick. My mom thought I got into like Harvard. Like she had no idea what was going on. And so I was like, this could be a great opportunity. Community college didn't work out. Just wasn't applicable for me. Didn't like it. And I don't even know what like my degree going into Delaware County. It was Delaware County Community College. The community college was. So I get into this school, and I also go in as a machine shop, right? So they have 6 different trades you could do: power plant, machine shop, masonry, carpentry, paint at the time, and horticulture. So my top 2 were power plant or machine tool technology. Well, I didn't know anything about power plants, but I knew machining would teach me the ways of like how things are made. So I ended up getting into that class. It kind of flourished, right? Like all of the academics were catered to how you would apply them into the real world. I think we touched on like the math, like you put trigonometry in front of me and say, solve this problem. I don't care about it, right? So there's no connection to it. But when you apply it to how you're going to cut apart, where you're going to program, we learned, it started as manual or hand tools, physically making drift pins with a file, and then got into more hand tools, and then we would get onto manual machines, lathes, and bridge ports and things like that. And once we got into CNC programming, the math started to change a little bit, right? And that's where we would apply the math that you'd see where you'd say, where are you ever going to apply this in the real world? And we'd apply it on paper or however it may have been to cut parts, right? To write code by hand. And then you'd essentially have to program parts on paper and then bring it to the machine, and you'd find out at the machine if it worked, right? So you take all those classes that were applied to the trade that you were in and then go apply them to the machines. So it'd gone to, it's a 3-year school. So you do freshman, junior, senior year. There's no real sophomore year. And then the school sells it, and it's proven, right? If you look at the metrics of the school, it's like a 99% placement rate for whatever the years have been prior. And it's outstanding, right? So every year you get at that time when I applied, 2010, 2011, I think there was 400 or 500 applicants, and that 99 of us were accepted to our class. So that's 99 divided up into our 6 different categories of trades that they offer. So our machine shop started out with 19 people, I believe. Our graduating class was 13. So it's very strict. And kind of what I needed in my life, some structure, right? You got to get up in the morning, you got to make your bed, you got to shave, you got to wear a suit, you got to be at what was called lineup, where they check and see if your socks were black or white, and you can't wear white socks with black dress shoes. And it kind of puts some structure in your life, and the foundation is built on is take people from, we'll call it broken homes or not so great backgrounds, and turn them into contributing young men in the world, right? So it's all guys school. Went through that. Ended up going to Skills USA in 2014, which was pretty cool. Got to see, that was like my first exposure to other people in that industry. That was in Kansas City. And about 6 months before I graduated, got my first job offer. And I was like, oh, it is real, right? You might get a job before you graduate. hit the industry as an NC programmer, tool designer with a company called Genpact at the time, which was a contractor for GE. Spent some time doing that. Switched contracting houses internally a bit, still under that GE foundation. 2016, I'd gone to GE in Auburn, Alabama. Set up a few production lines. That's what I was telling you. They were Republic Lagoons, which I'd never seen before. Some old ones maybe, but they were brand new Republic Lagoons. 2017 came back to Baltimore where I'd started. Things were kind of in limbo at the time, I would say. That was from my perspective. They were talking about potentially selling the company, and that kind of scared me. It was just really, I'd been from home since I graduated, which at the time was maybe 4 years till 2018. Even though it wasn't that far from home, I'm from right outside of Philadelphia. It was an hour and a half from home, right? So the day after I graduated, I essentially moved to Baltimore, stayed there, and on a whim kind of moved to Alabama to try it, right? And ended up back in Baltimore and ultimately went to Boeing in Philadelphia in 2018 for just under 5 years, right? So I got to go back home and kind of do that, which was cool, right? It was like, all right. To me, I look at it as that traveling, and some people maybe call it a sacrifice, but it was all additional education that you could reach in all these different places that you go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Traveled a little bit for each. Mississippi site, Alabama, went to Bromont, Canada for a little bit, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Just supporting our efforts for whichever site I was at. Ended up moving to Delaware in 2023, and GE had reopened a site right near my house. Boeing was obviously going through some changes, right? They were looking at that future long-range program, which Bell ended up winning as the V-280 Valor, and things started slowing down on the military side, right? V-22s and Chinooks are what that Ridley Park site specializes in. And I was an operations manager at the time, and it was like, what's the future look like for me here? So I was applying skills that I had and learning more of the business side. And so I have a technical background, but I think the goal was to learn what do these managers and the people at the top do, right? The business side of things. How do you put your cost and schedule together? What drives your KPIs? And if I could, essentially what my goal was to do is apply this technical background, cross that bridge with the managerial background and business side of it, and get a more well-rounded side of the business, then the sky's the limit, right? So learned a lot at Boeing. I had some great mentors and people that I talked to there, and went to the GE site in 2023 to help with the startup of some, what am I startup? They were making some proprietary materials and things like that, and was programming and designing things there. It was a very small site, which is something I wasn't used to, having been at a lot of these bigger sites. Having bought the house in Delaware, I now became halfway from what would be home outside of Philadelphia and the site outside of Baltimore, which I started my career at, laid the foundation of everything I know. So I had been watching, they became ST Engineering, and I had been watching the job postings for quite some time, and I was like, this one role has been up for, I want to say it was a year. And it was everything I've done before, but now I have experience from all these other places. I've ran into a few people that work there, and I was like, hey, what's going on? Like, how are the changes? What do you think? And everyone spoke very highly of it. And they were like, well, you left. And I was like, I didn't leave because I didn't like being here. I left because I moved here right out of school and moved away from home, right? And the drive from Baltimore to outside of Philly every weekend it is what it is, right? So now I have a decent commute. However, I'm back with the team that essentially taught me everything I know. A place I know I could be myself and apply, like think freely outside of the box, and have people that also, instead of just shutting your ideas down immediately, are like, well, that might work, right? So
yeah, no, that's huge.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And so the biggest thing I've realized lately is I don't want to say I was kind of sheltered the previous 2 years, but when you can't really, I guess, be yourself, right? If you're surrounded by people that you could kind of relate to, which you don't have to, but people that are open to try new things, opportunities they're endless, right? And the chances for improvement. So the foundation started by not knowing how to do anything. And then like the willpower, I guess, if you want to call it, to go try and figure those things out and kind of keep my head on my shoulders to learn it.
Let's see if it'll come back.
Is it frozen again? No.
Switching sides. There we go.
What? I don't know what happened. I just completely lost everything. So that was me that time.
Oh, we're good now. I know. I was like, oh, you're frozen, and then it was gone.
I'll see. I'd be interested to see what the playback is, because I was talking to it for a couple of seconds to be like, hey, are you there? So I don't know if it's lagging real
Yeah,
bad
I
or
mean,
not.
worst case, like I said, we can do. I got to stretch here.
No, you're good.
We can do next week as well. We're gonna get this thing
Yeah,
regardless.
that's whatever you want to do. I don't know. Like I said, we had a pretty bad outage. I think it was yesterday, and everything was screwed up. So I guess did it restart?
No, it's still recording.
All right. I don't even know where I left off. Too much caffeine this morning.
I'm actually not enough for the first time. So one of those. Yeah, I like woke up early and then I'm like I'm just gonna sleep in a little bit. I never get to do that. So yeah.
I forget where I even left off.
You were talking about basically, well, yeah, and the ability when you're with a company when they allow you to think outside of the box.
Yeah, I think so. I guess you don't realize. I guess what I would say is you don't realize how significant that is until you can't do it, right? If you're report to people or work with people or are surrounded by people that are open to interesting ideas, there's opportunities for advancement or improvement. And I think that's especially in the industry, right? Everyone wants continuous improvement, and it allows you to kind of think freely. If you come up with actually the site that I was just at, there was a guy, he was a machinist, and he'd been running a lot of the ceramic matrix composite material for a while, which is a whole new animal compared to a whole nother animal compared to regular composites and steels and things like that. And kind of just been doing the same thing for a while, right? Had his own habits, had his own feeds and speeds, had his way of doing some things. And the material was new to me. So I kind of went in with an open mind. It was like, why don't we try and just let it rip on this material, see what happens? We brought in some different tools, tried a bunch of different things, and we significantly increased production time on what otherwise had just been done the same way for so long, right? So even like a new set of eyes, if I have an idea, and even when I design something now, I'll run it by people that I think have a different perspective, a different mindset, and say, what do you think of this? Is it, there's there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. You could ask anyone that's in tool design or manufacturing or programming. The way you do it isn't always the best way, right? So you got to be open to that criticism and understanding. And I think having done that, I'd say for, almost 11 years now, is you pick up on how other people think, right? And think outside the box, which is huge, right? And it goes, I think in some relation to that, mentors throughout my career have been monumental. Even just executives, people that I didn't even know knew my name, I would just grab them, especially at Boeing, just grab them and say, hey, do you have 15 minutes so I could pick your brain? And they'd be like, yeah. Anyway, Chris, how are things going? I was like, oh, you know my name? Hell yeah. So, and then just sit down with those people, close the door and have an open conversation. Because I think the view is that you always have to be, not, I don't want to say walking on eggshells, but handle yourself very professionally and almost shelter yourself from who you really are when you talk to some of these big people. But if you reach out to them and you get to be yourself and they get to be themselves, you're going to get a whole different point of view than what you see on the shop floor when people are trying to, keep that persona of a, does that make sense? Kind of like like the
tiptoeing around how they.
Where if you present yourself in front of 100 people, there's certain barriers you can't kind of cross. If you're having a one-on-one conversation, you ask someone, hey, how did you get to where you're at? And what advice do you have? People become an open book. And I think just not cold calling, but like just grabbing people on a whim when they're least expecting it and saying, hey, do you have 10 minutes where I could pick your brain? Just what advice do you have? Here's what I've done. What can I change? What did you do? And what would you have changed? And if you talk to 10, 15, you talk to people all the time, right? You're just got to be a plethora of knowledge, right? And all these people have this different advice. If you become a sponge to absorb all that, all the resources are right in front of you, right? So I think, I talk to people completely outside of my organization. I call people from other companies all the time and just say, hey, how's it doing? How's it going? What are you doing in a work setting, right? What are you doing in this application, or what are you doing to expedite like cutting times or design times or things like that? But, even in some of the side business that I talked to you about, I've developed relationships with people who own shops. I talked to you about it the other day. I, message Greg, right? But I call people from shops all the time. I call, some heavy hitters at some of the big tooling houses and a lot of people that own small machine shops. And I'd say, how do you do it? What would you do if you were my age and this is what you have right now? This is what's in your deck of cards. And I think I told you last time they all have the same answer, right? You just got to do it. I'll say that. Yeah. You just got to go in better better terms, right? Yeah, I think
Yeah, and I think maybe underutilized is mentorship and asking people for advice. And that's the
absolutely.
thing. A lot of people assume, or at least I did when I was younger, that you have to follow that advice exactly how it is. It's like, no, you take all this advice, you assimilate it, and then you're able to figure out your own path. But the more knowledge you have about situations, the better you're going to do.
100%. And if you don't, what do you, and just like I said the other day, it's like, I was telling my mom, like I'd been working in the garage a lot last week, and she said, why are you working so late? And her late and my late are a little bit different, but I was like, and I jokingly texted her, I said, Mom, I'm trying to start a business. And she was like, well, I know, but like, why are you working so hard? And like, she's got this different perspective, right? She thinks I'm just like,
Yeah.
I get up at 4 and I don't go to bed till midnight. But I mean, it's not the case all the time. But I was like, well, you're going to succeed or fail, but you won't know what happens unless you try, right? And the same thing goes for conversation with reaching out for people to people, right? And I'm sure you go through a lot. I'm sure you reach out to people and probably mostly
Yep.
successful, right? I'm sure there's some people that are like, no, maybe.
Yep.
And what do you lose? Nothing, right? And then
Nothing.
if you in my point of view, if you kind of set that ego aside to say they don't want to talk, that's fine. Had I not reached out, I wouldn't have known, but they could have answered, could have had a conversation, or I could have met up with them or things like that. So I think it's underrated. I think it's a thing that, especially the younger crowd, right? Reach out to people that are
Mhm.
doing better than you or where you want to be and find out what they're doing. You might develop a relationship that's lasts a lifetime, and you
Oh,
can learn from, if you have a contact that you could talk to around the clock when you have problems, it's invaluable. It's priceless. I think that, yeah, so I think that's underrated. And
yeah, and you can definitely jump years ahead by doing that.
absolutely. And some people just don't, and you don't have to have, an outgoing personality. It's just, if you spark a conversation, someone that has a bunch of information, people may not ask that person. And they maybe have bottled up all this information for years and said, here's everything I got, right? So, call it a missed opportunity for some people, but I advocate for reach out to people. I had a couple guys reach out to me, which I was like, all right, cool. And they were like, I forget, they had a very significant educational background. And I came from like a trade school. I did some of my bachelor work, but I was like, oh, I was like, what do you want to know from me? And they're like, well, and they started typing and sent me a couple messages. And I'm like, here's my number. Just call me. Anything I'll tell you everything I did, everything I've seen in the industry. And if this is the industry you want to get into, I will be an open line for whatever you want to talk about. So I talk to these guys pretty often now, and they're like just getting their foot in the door with the aviation aerospace industry, I'll say. So it's pretty neat. I'm trying to think of
Yeah,
what.
that's awesome. Yeah, I do see we are over the time limit
Yeah.
here, Chris. Pleasure talking with you, and yeah, look forward to seeing more of your content. Also, if people are interested, Massey Designs, so just reach out to Chris directly. Kind
Awesome.
of talk through that real quick.
Yeah. So basically, I think it was when I had gone to Boeing, I got into a role that was less technical than my prior experiences, right? So having the knowledge of designing, programming, procurement, data packages, things like that, and not utilizing that in the workspace, I was like, why not allow other people to have access to this, right? So your general consumer, your mom that wants a monogram for a holiday gift, or your local machine shop who needs a tool designed or something of that nature that needs quotes from other people. So the idea behind that is to primarily in-house, small-scale CNC plasma cutting, 3D printing, designing, and things like that. But also I have the resources, and I think I told you, I literally have a Rolodex of shops that I've talked to, nationwide, where essentially if you have an idea and want it made, and I have the knowledge to be able to design it or make it, I also have the resources to, what I think do is reach out and get you probably the best quote. And that's the idea behind it, right? So been building the foundation for that for, I guess, about 5 years now, maybe 6. Just started as just designing. Then we moved here, got the CNC plasma cutter. I got to get a Bridgeport wired up. And then keep talking to people like Greg, right? To tell you to bite the bullet on buying a machine. So I don't know if brand new Mazak's in the budget, but if I would come across a Haas at a yard sale, maybe. But so that's the idea behind that. So I enjoy doing it too, but I'm working on how to pitch that better with exposure, right? How do you keep up as a one-man band? And I'm trying to teach my wife how to use Fusion 360.
Joe?
We're getting,
Yeah.
you're getting there. I appreciate that.
Well, awesome, Chris. Appreciate your time and enjoy your weekend.
Absolutely. You too. Let me know if that doesn't work out. We'll have to get together.